Hello everyone! I have a most interesting game for you, and it's not only interesting, it's also quite complicated. It was played in 1991 in Brussels. It was the candidates tournament, the quarterfinals. Vassily Ivanchuk is playing against Artur Yusupov. And if you've seen my series of 1991 Linares tournament featuring Vassily Ivanchuk, or maybe you know it from general knowledge, in 1991 Ivanchuk was like a chess god. He won the Linares tournament ahead of Kasparov and Karpov, and he was just a beast. You know, everybody thought he would become the next world champion. And here he faces Artur Yusupov, a Russian grandmaster, also a chess writer, and Yusupov actually beats him with a result of 5.5 to 4.5. So a small margin, but enough to kick Ivanchuk out of the run for the world championship. And many consider this to be Yusupov's immortal game, as he does have the black pieces against a beast like Ivanchuk, and the game is beautiful. It's something Mikhail Tal wouldn't mind adding to his collection. So here's a little additional challenge for you. Try to figure out where was the point of no return for Ivanchuk in this game. And like I said, Yusupov is a Russian grandmaster, but he is living in Germany. He moved to Germany in 1991 as he got robbed. He got robbed in his apartment in Moscow, and he found the burglars robbing his apartment, and he got shot. So he barely survived, and he decided he doesn't want to live in Moscow anymore. In 1977, he won the World Junior Championship and was immediately awarded the title of International Master. Today, I believe if you win the World Junior Championship, you're immediately awarded the Grandmaster title because, young players now have much higher ratings. And he won a lot of tournaments, and he achieved amazing results in even more tournaments. He even won the Canadian Championship once. So definitely quite a guy. And he was participating in the candidates the 3 times. A very strong player, but still, he's facing the 1991 Ivanchuk, the beast. So let's see this game. Like we said, Ivanchuk has the white pieces, and he plays c4. We have e5, the English opening, the King's English variation. g3, d6, bishop to g2, g6 now. Already a weird pawn structure by Artur Yusupov. d4, knight to d7, knight to c3, bishop to g7, knight to f3, knight to g to f6, castles. We have queen to c2, both sides developing, rook to e8, rook to d1 now. We have c6, b3, queen to e7, and here already we have an interesting move by Ivanchuk. A move to consider here would be probably something like e3, maybe e4, perhaps capturing with d captures on e5, and after d captures on e5, only then push e4. So a lot of options here for Ivanchuk, but after queen to e7, Ivanchuk played bishop to a3. Pinning this pawn here, also now he's definitely preparing d captures on e5, but he allows Yusupov to push e4, and Yusupov does this, of course. e4. We have knight to g5, and now e3. So already messing up Ivanchuk's pawn structure a little. This e2 pawn will stay backwards forever, and this e3 pawn will be a super pawn in this game. So of course f4 was played. You definitely don't want to capture here because queen checks, king h1, and you lose the knight. So after e3, Ivanchuk goes for f4. We have knight to f8, now preparing to bring the light square bishop into the game. b4, Ivanchuk expands on the queen side. Bishop to f5 with a tempo on the queen. Queen to b3. h6 now, kicking the knight away from g5. Knight to f3. And knight to g4. Already you can see that Yusupov has some ideas of attacking on the king side. This knight is a beautiful piece on g4. It's adding more protection to the e3 pawn. It's ready to jump to f2 at any moment, and it's eyeing the h2 pawn. And you can't really kick it away from there. If you try an idea like h3, you're not going to enjoy this very much. Knight to f2 attacks both the rook on d1 and the pawn on h3. So you probably have to give up the rook. If you try to protect the rook with something like rook f1, knight captures with check, bishop captures, and if you still want to protect your rook after something like rook to d1, queen e6 is bringing the queen into the attack, and after king h2 something like bishop g4, and white is completely lost here. Black's attack will soon prevail. So after knight to g4, Ivanchuk simply continues with his expansion on the queen side. He plays b5. g5 is played, and Ivanchuk plays b captures on c6. It's like both players are completely not interested in what the other guy is doing. B captures on c6, and now we have knight to e5. This isn't a sacrifice or anything, of course, the knight can be captured. This bishop is slicing all the way to the queen. So g captures on f4. We have knight captures on c6, attacking the queen, queen to g5 now, and bishop captures on d6. Ivanchuk grabs that d6 pawn. He creates two pass pawns, the c4 pawn and the d4 pawn, and also the bishop is now adding protection to the g3 pawn if needed. So knight to g6 by Yusupov. We have knight to d5, threatening some nasty knight e7 checks, but Yusupov plays queen to h5. Now threatening queen captures on h2. This would be very nasty. So h4, Ivanchuk stops this, and here we have knight captures on h4, sacrificing a piece for the attack as well. You do have two knights here, a bishop, a queen, and these two pawns. This attack looks very promising. G captures on h4 by Ivanchuk, and queen captures on h4. And we have knight d to e7 with check. And what do you do here? Well, you don't really get anything if you capture the knight. The other knight captures back again with check, and you're still losing the bishop on f5. So no point in doing this. After knight d to e7 check, king to h8 was played, and now knight captures on f5 with a tempo on the queen. So already this is move 26, and Yusupov is down 2 pieces. So definitely, definitely an attack is going on here. Queen to h2 check by Yusupov, king to f1 only move by Ivanchuk, and now rook to e6, preparing rook to g6 and getting that rook into the attack. Queen to b7, Ivanchuk attacks the rook on a8, but Yusupov totally ignores it. He plays rook to g6. He's given up the a8 rook with tempo. Ivanchuk grabs it, queen captures on a8 with check, king to h7, and it's very hard for Ivanchuk now to find any move. Because if you play, let's just show what happens if you play a normal move that's a silly move. For example, if you capture the bishop, knight captures on g7, you're getting checkmated, and it's a beautiful checkmate. Queen to h1 check. So Yusupov would even sacrifice a queen, and after bishop captures, knight to h2 check. The king can't go anywhere. The rook is covering g2 and g1. This pawn is covering f2, so the king has to go to e1, and now rook to g1 is checkmate. So after king to h7, Ivanchuk played the only thing he could. He played queen to g8. He beat Yusupov to the queen sacrifice. King captures on g8, and now knight to e7 with check. King goes back, and now knight captures rook on g6. F captures on g6, and now knight captures on g7. Knight to f2, and this knight to f2 move, it seems like it's not doing anything. It seems like it's just attacking the rook, and also maybe you don't really have anything with the queen here. You can't give check on g1 or h1. But there is a terrible threat here, actually. If you were to save this knight on g7, for example, with something like knight to e6, you're immediately getting checkmated. Knight to h3, and there is no avoiding checkmate. The threat is queen to g1 checkmate. You can't stop this, even if you run with the king. The d2 square is covered by the pawn. And if you capture the knight, then queen to f2 is checkmate. So, not gonna happen. So after knight to f2, Ivanchuk played bishop captures on f4, now with a tempo on the queen. Queen captures on f4, and we have knight to e6, now getting the knight into the game with a tempo on the queen. But queen to h2 was played, and again, the threat is the same, knight to h3. So Ivanchuk tried rook d to b1, knight to h3 was played, and now Ivanchuk tries rook to b7 check. And it doesn't really matter what Yusupov plays here. Both the g8 and h8 are fine for the black king. He played king to h8. Ivanchuk tried one more time with rook to b8 with check, deflecting the queen from checkmating the white king. So Yusupov had to capture first. Queen captures on b8. Ivanchuk captured the knight on h3, bishop captures on h3, but now Yusupov simply brings back the queen. Queen to g3, and in this position, the great Vassily Ivanchuk resigned the game. Even though, considering material, he does have 2 pieces and the rook for the queen. Both players have 4 pawns, but he's getting checkmated on the next move, whatever he plays. There is no defense against queen to f2 checkmate. The king can't move. None of the pieces can guard f2. This is just one hell of a position. So yeah. How do you like this game? Do you think it rises to the name of the Immortal game? I kind of do. I really enjoyed this game. I hope you did as well. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon.